The first question I have for you is just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, um, I'll try to be relevant in telling you about myself, and I won't take the full time giving you the whole history. My career, um, well, I mean, quickly, I'm from Chicago. I went undergraduate to Wisconsin, went graduate school to Columbia and to NYU, collected master's degrees for a while, taught a little bit,
Hmm.
taught for a few years, and but that was ne it was never my intent to be a teacher. That just happened for a variety of reasons. And then went to Procter and Gamble. And at Procter and Gamble, I was in brand management in the detergent division there, and so was on Dash and Tide, and Cheer. Ran Cheer detergent, which basically doesn't exist anymore, but at the
Uh-huh.
time was the um, second largest detergent brand in the world. Um, and Tide was the first largest for that matter. And then figured out that well, kind of knew all along that I probably didn't want to stay inside a large company and had no clue what to do.
Hmm.
And went to consulting thinking, well, I'll do this 2 or 3 years, work for different kinds of companies, figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And I'm still working on it. I'm still consulting and still aren't, I'm not sure what I want to be when I grow up. I've liked consulting where I work for a bunch of different I have worked for a bunch of different kinds of companies, um, and not just companies, but I've worked for cities. City of New York was a client. City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho was a client. Um, but what I do is strategic planning and marketing management consulting. And I have clients, Nick, who view me as a marketing guy,
Hmm.
and the projects are marketing. I have clients who view me as a strategic planning guy, and and the projects are strategic planning. And the strategic planning clients might bring a marketing guy in to help them, and the marketing clients might bring in a strategic planning guy to help them, which is a lesson in positioning. You can't be positioned to do too many things at once. But over time, because a lot of my clients have been retainer clients, and that's how I met your professor. I was working with Signet Jewelers. You would know them as Kay, Jared, Zales. They're the
Oh,
largest
yes, yes.
jewelry retailer in the world. And Tom um, worked on the media side, as you probably are aware. But I was doing both strategic planning and marketing for them because they were a client ultimately for about 22 years. So
Mhm.
there are longer term relationships where I end up doing both, but brand management is, I guess, a kind of a general management structure in running a business.
Mhm.
And so at Procter and Gamble, strategic planning and marketing are one and the same thing. So that's the little bit about myself. I've had 180 some different clients. Um, the projects range from Vulcan Materials was a client of mine. They are the largest miners of rock, sand, and gravel from the earth. Clearly, it was strategic planning. Marketing was if your roadbed is within 40 miles of our quarry, we have great number 10 stone and we will consistently give you number 10 stone. That's not heavy marketing as you and I would define it.
Yeah.
Um, and then on the other side, Nike's been a client, PepsiCo's been a client, more pure marketing of their products. So with that as background, what can I tell you?
Yeah. Well, I'm just very interested about you were talking about the how you do with the jewelry because I'm actually trying to get into jewelry myself.
Really?
My grandpa, he's a jeweler, and so
Oh,
this summer I'm gonna take some GIA classes and work with him a little bit, and then see what else I could do with that.
what he's a retailer or what does he do?
He um he owns a store, and he doesn't like he's not the one who like fixes it, or he can fix it, but he has like people to fix it. But he's a retailer, yeah.
Okay. And where?
In Maplewood, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume you're in New Jersey. So yeah, I mean what I did and arguably it can be relevant here. What I did for Signet, and at the time they were known as Sterling, but the parent company was Signet, and the U.S. division was Sterling. The U.S. division being the overwhelming majority of the business, although they're the largest in the UK as well.
Yeah.
But here it was just Kay and Jared. It wasn't Zales when I started working with them in 1996.
Hmm.
But we grew enough to be able to go buy Zales. But they're mall jewelers. Now, Jared, a lot of the Jared, most Jared stores are not, but Kay and Zales, and they're the
Yeah.
crux of the business. And my assessment was that if you walked into a mall and didn't look at the name on the store and just walked into the stores, they were all selling the same stuff at pretty much the same prices.
Hmm.
And so we needed to find a way to differentiate Kay, who was my basic, my original client there.
Yeah.
And the way we did it was actually branding. I mean, I do a lot of branding. I'm not just a branding guy, but I do a lot of branding. And I felt that if we could have certain kinds of products, certain brands of products that the competition wouldn't have, that would differentiate us from them. And so, because otherwise, really, other than watch brands, because there's always been watch brands,
Yes.
there are very few jewelry brands up until we started doing that in 1999. And so, your grandfather would probably be very familiar with what we did, but it really worked. And Kay went from being a very weak number two brand to being a very strong number one brand.
Yes.
And then we turned around, as I said, and we bought the Zales Corporation. Um, so my view of marketing, and I don't want to anticipate your questions, but my view of marketing is it starts from a strategic base. How do you define who your target audience is? How do you figure out how you can best reach that target audience? But does your product fit their needs? And if it does, then how you position it so that the consumer understands that your product fits their needs, to me, is the core of successful marketing. And then figuring out the best ways to get to them. Is it through social media now? In the old days, it was much simpler. When I started my career, Nick, there were three channels on your television set,
Hmm.
which tells you I'm an old guy, but
Yeah.
I'm probably your grandfather's age. Um, but there were three channels. So if you bought media on those three channels, you reached the overwhelming majority of the population just by buying three.
Hmm.
Today, with all the cable channels and all the social and whatever, a whole lot more difficult to get to your target audience. Now, if you buy social well, if you buy cable well, arguably, if you know that you've got a tightly defined target audience, you can do that. But it's not always so easy to define the target audience that tightly, and it's not always easy to find the media that reaches them. But anyway, in a nutshell, that to me is the essence of how the process ought to work. But I'll
Hmm.
be quiet, wait for your questions.
Yeah. So yeah, my next question would be, have you ever faced like an ethical dilemma with one of these like clients or situations?
Um, I talked to one other of your classmates who asked the same question, and the answer I don't remember exactly how I answered it with him, but no, I mean the quick answer is I haven't faced an ethical dilemma. I'm a 60s kid.
Hmm.
And in the 1960s, the view of corporate America, not that to some degree it isn't still that today, but in the 1960s, it was almost socially unacceptable to think that corporate America was populated by good people.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had a lot of questions. And when I started my career at Procter and Gamble, and I may have even said this to him, I don't recall. When I started my career at Procter and Gamble, they were under fire from the government and from ecology groups, and the whole ecological movement was brand new in those days.
Hmm.
I think the first Earth Day was in the early 70s. and which is when I started my career. I started my career in 1971. Um, but the thought was that the ingredients in detergents would pollute the water systems, lakes, rivers, streams. And actually, if it's a very slow moving body of water, a small pond or whatever, the phosphates in detergents actually did clog it up a little bit.
Mm.
Represented about 1.5% of the waterways in this country, but nonetheless, it was real in that context.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was interviewing a Procter and Gamble, and I was not much older than you, I was sitting with a very senior guy in my last interview, and I asked him whether his neighbors hated him. Little naive, but why would my neighbors? Well, because you're selling detergents, and detergents are pollutants and whatever. What I learned over the course of my career, starting at Procter and Gamble, by the way, which is a very ethical, very well-run company,
Mm-hmm.
as most all are, what I learned is they're good people, and people care about people, and uh, the corporations aren't out to injure their customers. Now, are there examples? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
where companies find out that there is something wrong with their product and don't always announce it or deal with it as quickly as they should. Absolutely, that there are examples of that. I never really faced it. In fact, quite the contrary. My early experience at Procter and Gamble was such that we spent huge amount of money for this relatively small but real problem for some locations
Mm-hmm.
where, soft water, hard water, we can get into the chemistry of detergency. I promise you we won't. Um, but we created all sorts of formula options at great expense and tested them all to come up with the most efficacious, the most hardworking detergent that we could at significant cost. And the truth is that the detergents that existed in the 1950s and 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and in most of the 70s basically did a better job than the detergents today because phosphates were the best ingredient. And Procter and Gamble announced it regularly. I mean, they went to the government. Everybody understood that the substitutes we were coming up with were not as good. They were fine for most everybody's wash. The way you and I would probably get clothes dirty, not a problem. But if we were coal miners, hey, a problem.
Yeah.
So I learned early on that corporations are concerned about their customers, and I've worked for many of them now. And again, there are examples that I have read about, there's examples that I understand where there were certain individuals who perhaps hid some data. I mean, you could talk about the cigarette companies, etc. But no, I personally have never faced an ethical dilemma where I had a problem with what my client was doing and where I felt uncomfortable that I was being asked to do something that was, untoward, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Um.
Corporate America is populated by people like you and me, good people wanting to do the right thing. And
Yeah.
there are examples in every profession of people who maybe don't follow the same ethical standards that we would want everyone to. But no, I would tell you my experience with corporations has been that you're not dealing with unethical people.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking about like how the detergents causes phosphates in the water and everything. Did you like you said a little bit about like during the interview you said like did your neighbors hate you? Did you have any other kind of perspective on that? Like did you feel a different
No,
way?
no, I mean, I had the naive perspective of being a 60s kid, assuming corporate America was populated by a bunch of bad people and who just cared about selling their product. And so I asked this senior guy, relatively senior guy, but very senior from the perspective of someone who was interviewing for a job, which, by the way, he gave me. And he turned out a few years later to be a significant mentor of mine. I
Hmm.
mean, I ran sheer detergent which was the fourth largest brand they had, as my first brand. Usually, when you become a brand manager, they give you a small piece of business and so on. And this guy, um, may he rest in peace, um, was, yeah, absolutely mentored me through my career. But no, I just had this broad sense that a whole lot of people still have,
Hmm.
that corporations are out to just, which they are, they're out to, for the benefit of their shareholders, to sell as much of their product as possible. But they're careful to create the kind of products that people want. And if there's something wrong with the product, sooner or later, it's almost always going to be found out. And so, no, I didn't have any sense of really, other than the fact that and by the way, when you interview at Procter and Gamble, it's kind of, it isn't so much luck of the draw, but wherever the need is, so they have food division and they have a division that they, in those days, I don't know if they still do, but called it toilet goods. And toilet goods was simply deodorants and toothpaste and various kinds of personal grooming products. So I think there's a better name for the division than toilet goods, which was is what it was then, and I don't even know what it is today. I mean, I've been going from Procter and Gamble since December of 1976. So
Yeah.
in the context of your life, I've been gone forever. But um, you just get assigned to a division. Hey, they're going to need somebody in the paper goods division or in the bar soap division or in the detergent division, and you just get assigned there. And I just happened to be assigned to interview for the division that was under fire. And a quick piece of trivia is that when I started, and I don't think they did this intentionally, but they put me on Dash detergent. And Dash detergent, which doesn't exist anymore, and you've probably never heard of it,
Hmm.
but Dash detergent was a more concentrated formulation. So there was a higher level of phosphate in a cup of detergent than there was for any other. There were all, which I think is still on the market, all in Dash were the quote unquote biggest offenders on a per cup of detergent basis, and that's what they put me on first. But no, I didn't have any personal experience that suggested there was a problem. I had the naive perception that a whole lot of the population does. My wife was a professional dancer. This is a second marriage for me.
Hmm.
And so fairly recently, I mean, I've known her now, we've been together for 17 years and married 10. But in the early days in particular, she would say the same kind of dumb stuff, if you will, about people who worked in large corporations that I said.
Yeah.
So, I'm probably giving you more information than you need, but the bottom line is no. I mean, you can run into situations, I think, depending on what your job was, for example, in a tobacco company at a point in time when maybe they understood pretty well that this was not healthy for people, and
Yeah.
they went out of their way to camouflage that. Um, there certainly are examples, but I personally have never really had the problem. I worked for a cigar company, the largest premium cigar. I don't know if you smoke cigars, and you shouldn't, and whatever. Don't have your parents, don't go tell your parents that I told you should smoke cigars.
Well, on
But
special occasions.
I do, yeah. I smoke. I mean, I think the last time I smoked a cigar was probably 3 or 4 years ago. But I've always smoked the occasional cigar. I never smoked cigarettes. But I worked for a premium cigar manufacturer, and I had no ethical dilemma selling cigars. But at that point, which was in the late 90s and early 2000s, everybody understood what the risks were and weren't. And certainly we weren't suggesting to anybody that they should inhale cigars and whatever. I mean, are cigars good for you? Of course not. Did I have an ethical dilemma selling them? No, we weren't doing anything where we were going into, you know, if you will, grammar schools and suggesting
Yeah.
that kids ought to smoke cigars. We weren't doing anything that I would have had an ethical problem with.
Yeah. So do you still do the occasional cigar or?
Yeah, the way you do. I mean, for a special occasion, although it's been a few years, but I mean, if I were, I actually. I was, just as you know, I was in Michigan where my mother-in-law passed away, and my nephew, and this is my family by marriage. This is my wife's family. Um, but I've been around for a while now, as I said, 17 years. And my nephew, who I actually now do some work with, my nephew's 41,
Hmm.
and he's a big cigar smoker, and he knows that know a lot about cigars because I worked for a cigar manufacturer for about 6 or 7 years, and would fly down to the Dominican Republic and to Jamaica and so on, where people are, sitting at their workbenches and hand rolling cigars,
Hmm.
which is the way cigars basically are made. Certainly premium cigars, that's the way they're still
Yeah.
made. Um, and so he brought some and kept saying, we're going to have to find some time to celebrate grandma, his grandma,
Yeah.
and smoke cigars. But we didn't.
Hmm.
We never got around to it. Part of the problem, Nick, is I won't smoke a cigar if I'm wearing clothes that are, that I
Yeah.
may need to wear again before I clean them. I
Yeah.
won't smoke a cigar inside my home,
Oh no.
or let anybody do it. I won't smoke a cigar inside my car. So if the weather's nice and I can smoke outside and I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, great, let's go smoke
Yeah.
cigars. Otherwise, not so easy.
Yeah. I think the only time I ever really smoke a cigar is with my uncle, who's a big, not really a big cigar guy, but like on like special occasions, like let's say like Thanksgiving or something like that. We'll usually do one, or like if it's my birthday or I have a wedding coming up in May, I can almost guarantee you I'll be or maybe I will. I don't know. I'm in the bachelor party, so we'll see. I don't know if I really want that stench all night though, so we'll see.
Well, that's the problem. And if you have to wear the same clothes the next day, that is a big
Yeah,
problem. You know,
yeah,
if it's the same suit coat, not so much. But
exactly.
seriously, um, I enjoy a good cigar, particularly after a rich dessert or something like that. I enjoy just the camaraderie of, being outside with some buddies and just talking and maybe drinking some good scotch or whatever and having a cigar is kind of a nice thing. But then if you ask me, when I was working with these guys, by the way, just more into trivia,
Mhm.
there were those guys, you'd sit in a meeting, you smoked a cigar out of self-defense
Mhm.
because everybody's sitting in a room. I mean, imagine 10 guys around a boardroom table, all smoking cigars. I mean, you better like cigars if you're going to be in that situation. But there was one guy in particular who actually was the head of marketing, who was a chain cigar smoker. He
Mhm.
would literally light up his first cigar as he walked from his bed to the bathroom in the morning,
Wow.
and he would smoke 16 or 17 cigars a day. He knew that's how many it was, and he had a cigar in his mouth all day long. A guy named John Reno, and I hope John Reno is alive and well today. I haven't talked to him probably in 25 years.
Yeah.
Um, but a chain cigar smoker, that can't be good for you.
No, no, no shot.
Yeah.
Were they like the big ones? Because well, first off, I feel like cigars are normally like kind of expensive, and then
Well,
especially if
not for him. My
yeah, well, yeah,
cigars, yeah. I mean, my cigars for the time that 5, 6 years I worked with them, they would just, go into the humidor, and the humidor, of course, was a room,
mhm. Oh
a
wow,
big room, and take what you want. I'd walk out of there with 3 boxes of premium cigars, every time I would drive up to the client.
yeah,
And of course, they were a client. I had multiple clients, but um, no, that they're most of my clients. Like if you work for a jewelry company, you don't get free samples.
yeah,
Um, but if you work for a food company or for a cigar manufacturer or whatever, then you do. So I have a little humidor that I try to remember to keep the humidity right on so I can preserve the 2 dozen cigars that I probably can fit into that. But yes, they're the big, good ones like Macanudo, Partagas, Cohiba, and so
yeah,
on.
yeah. My brother, he has a humidor, and I never got one. I never really got like into it, like where I wanted to get a humidor and get a bunch of cigars. But who knows, maybe one day. So anyway, talking about your clients and
Yeah,
was there any like can you think of a marketing campaign that you just really liked
yeah. I mean, I've liked a lot of them.
or one that was your favorite?
I don't know that I have a favorite. Let me think for a second about something that would be. a good example. Well, I already started, and just because it's relatively more recent, I'm not sure it's the first one I would go to, but I will go to it first just because it's top of mind, is that um, we did a brand for, I don't know if you may be too young. I don't know if the name Jane Seymour means anything to you, but
What's that?
your your professor worked on it, which is why I'm using it as an example. We had a brand that was called Open Hearts by Jane Seymour. She's an actress. She was originally a Bond girl. Um, and her mother was in a Japanese internment, Indonesian internment camp, I believe, um, during World War II.
Hmm.
And her philosophy of life became keep your heart open, help other people. There's always people in worse condition. And certainly in this internment camp, there were. She became kind of a pseudo nurse. And she felt that she got through it all because she had the psychological advantage of helping people as opposed to just being miserable and afraid. And and so this actress Jane Seymour was brought up by her mom with that philosophy. And she saw Jane's also an artist, and she was just playing around with art one day, and she drew this heart that was kind of open. Just kind of it's a heart, but if you looked at it, it's not a fully enclosed heart. And she had a piece of jewelry made of that shape. And she was wearing it, and she was, I think, at the American Music Awards when the chairman and head marketing guy at what was then called Sterling, but the brand was K,
Hmm.
primary brand was. They saw it, and one of them was sitting next to her at dinner and asked about it. And long story short, they decided to make them and to market it. And so I was in charge of a brand called Open Hearts by Jane Seymour.
Oh, wow.
We did a lot of advertising for it. We built a very big business. It was one of the brands that we used, as I mentioned earlier, to kind of um, create a positioning for K Jewelers as
Yeah.
the place you would go if you wanted a brand of one of those brands of jewelry that was being marketed. You couldn't get that anywhere else
Hmm.
but at K. And so um, I think, did a good job of positioning that brand. If you keep your heart open, love will find its way in, was the advertising line. And it not just was successful by itself, but the reason why I point to it is that it also helped identify K Jewelers as a more special jeweler as opposed to just being another mall jeweler, if you will.
Yeah.
Another example that I would quickly give you is, and you live in New Jersey, so you're probably not familiar unless you spent a lot of time in California with AM, PM mini markets. But it's a convenience store chain, and this was a marketing program ultimately, but I guess initially what it really was a strategic business move where, and you may be too young to have heard of OPEC, but OPEC is the oil producing nations, and they were controlling pricing back in the 70s, and it became difficult for a while to get gas. There'd be long lines of cars, you may have read about it, just to get gas in a gas station because supply was down. So prices jumped, not to the level they were at today, but when I was growing up, you could get a gallon of gas for 19 cents. Again, proving to you that I'm old. But it went, suddenly the price of gasoline doubled and tripled. I think, if I remember correctly, what happened on a percent basis. And so the oil companies didn't need to have as many gas stations,
Hmm.
but they had this great real estate that they didn't really want to sell. What else could we do with them? So what we did with a bunch of the Atlantic Richfield companies, called Arco, gasoline stations, we converted them to convenience stores, and we decided to put gasoline pumps outside, and you'd have to come into the store. You couldn't pay at the pump in those days. You had to come inside the convenience store to pay for your gasoline. And so we lined up between the counter, which is kind of in the middle of the store with a view of what was happening. We lined up impulse items like tobacco products and candy and gum and those things that you had to walk right past before you paid for your gasoline. And so people bought a lot of impulse items that way. And we had other things like canned peas and so on. I mean, like a convenience store. But when we did that in 1977, we were the first to ever do that. So what you see convenience stores with gasoline, pumps all the time. But I
Yeah.
guess it's one of the things I'm most proud of because I did that, and now it's a very commonplace thing. We marketed it, we named it AM/PM to subtly say to people we're open 24
Yeah.
hours a day.
Hmm.
Um, as
Yeah.
opposed to just 7 and 11, to 11, as opposed to 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
We were open day and night,
Hmm.
which we were because we were a gasoline station,
Hmm.
which convenience stores were not.
Yeah.
So the traditional convenience stores didn't have any reason. They had long hours, like 7 in the morning to 11 at night was, those are long hours,
Yeah.
because you never know when you're going to need a can of peas or cake mix or whatever. But now we had the built-in logical reason for being open all night because we were selling gasoline.
Yeah.
People fill up all night long.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that is all the questions I have for you. It was great talking to you.
Good
Um,
talking to you.
yeah, this was an honor to have you on here.
It's
So,
I appreciate you saying it that way, but not necessary to. If as you, I don't know where this goes, but if you have other questions, feel free. You now know how to get hold of me,
mhm.
and either by email or phone or whatever, if you have got questions. And the other thing I would say to you, so let me turn it around on you for a quick minute. What do you want to do? You want to go to work in your grandfather's jewelry store? Is that it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as it happens, totally by coincidence, you're talking to somebody who knows an awful lot about the jewelry business. So
Mhm.
if you have questions or if you get to some crossroads along the way where you're trying to figure out, and you would be helpful to talk to somebody who maybe has been there, whose hair is a different color than yours, but mine used to be your color,
Yeah.
I promise, which means, please God, someday yours will be mine, and then you'll pass it on and you'll help some kid. Um, but if you've got questions or if I can ever be helpful, Nick, feel free to just get in touch with me, remind me who you are, and I am more than happy to be a sounding board for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm 100% gonna hit you up at one point. I guarantee it.
Well, Don't don't think twice. I'm more than happy to help. And if you got questions, depending on where this report goes, and again, I'm not sure what the scope of this assignment is.
Mhm.
Do you have to write something up, or I don't
Yeah,
know?
I'm after this. I just have to write a little summary about it, and then I can put it into the submission.
Got it. Well, if you have questions, feel free to get back to me.
All right, thank you
All right,
again.
take care. Bye.